So we're now on Daf Vav Amid Beis, and we're listing cases in which the Minchas Knos has to be burnt. Number one, Ha'omeres Tmeani. She says, I admit, I confess the crime. And therefore, the Mayim can no longer be bodek her, and therefore the Mincha is not kosher, it should be burnt. Number two, V'shebola edim sheitmeya. We have witnesses that testify that she had znus, and therefore the mayim is not bodek. So the Gemara clarifies this, analyzes this. The asu edim amos. When did these edim come to testify? Ilema mekami de tikdosh. Now, when the mincha is placed into a klishares, the klishares is makadish the mincha. And the Gemara now is vacillating. At what point did the Edom come to testify that she had this adultery? If you're going to tell me they came before there was kiddush of the mincha and klishares, so we don't have to burn such a thing. It only has what's called kedushas damim and not kedushas aguf, and therefore tepuk lechulin. Then the mincha is subject to pidyon. Let me just see if I. He says, "Kol hamenachos shekidshu rak b'kedushas peh, v'adayin lo nichnasu leklishares, yecholos lotzeis midei hegdish al yidei pidyon." And this is a sugi at the end of menachos. Elo, but rather by process of elimination, if we have to justify the Mishnah that says that the mincha is nisrefes, then it's got to be lebasar de kadosh. After the mincha was already placed and sanctified in a klishares, and therefore it has kedushas haguf, which doesn't lend itself to pidyon. And now the Edom come and testify that she had this nus. So therefore the mincha is psula because we can no longer be mashka her, and therefore we have to burn the mincha. He adds over here, Eino ba elo lahazkir avon ulevarech shechata. In other words, the whole mincha is connected to the process of clarifying and establishing her znus through the process of hashka. Now she is nidches, she's excluded from hashka. And that's one of two things, either because of her own confession or because the witnesses testified on her tumah. So she's already what's called biduka vomedes. And if she's biduka vomedes, then the mincha is not accompanying the hashkas Sotah, and therefore it's nisrefes. Now we're going to raise the kasha on Rav Sheshes. Mayim bod kivosa. I can understand this if Mayim are effective, even though there are Edim somewhere that saw the Tumah and she already drank from the Memorim, Alma, then I understand that Bas Migdash Umikravi. This mincha was Ru'uyel Iskadish B'Kli Shores. It was fit and appropriate for Akrav al Gabi Mizbeach. V'chi Kadosh Meikar, Shaper Kadosh. When they placed the mincha into the klishares in order to sanctify the mincha, it effectively, for sure, was Makadish the mincha. And Kiddush Saguf is Chal, Umishum Hachi Mincha Nisrefes. So since there was a Chalos Kiddush Saguf Meikara from the beginning, from the get-go, therefore the mincha is Kadosh with Kiddush Saguf, and now it is excluded from any sort of pidyon with Kiddush Saguf, and therefore Nisrefes. We have nothing to do with this mincha if the Eidim now testify. But if you're going to tell me that when there are Eidim that knew that she had Tumah Ein Hamayim, both according to Rav Sheshes, the Mayim is ineffective, is now we find out that even at the moment that they were Makadish the Mincha the Klishares, Tigloi Milsam Afreya, Techi Kodesh Mei Kara, B'Tos Kodesh. There was a Tos in the original Hegdish. V'Tepik L'Chulin. And therefore, it doesn't even require pidyon. It's completely chulin. And this is based on a Mishnah Nazir on Daf Lamed Aleph that Hegdish B'Tos Eino Hegdish. Again, there's a long discussion here about Asham Toli Shabal Asafek, but in any event, Omer Rabbi Yehuda Diskarta. Yes, if there were Eidim that testify that she was Tmeah, and through this stira she became Tmeah, then the mincha is yotzis l'chulin. It was a mekach tos. It was a kiddushay tos, a hegdesh b'tos, even though it was placed in a klisharis. The mincha is nisrefes, kigon shezinsa bazar. She took a coin of the Pirchei Kahuna and she had znus with him in the Azara. The chikodesh meikar shaper kadosh. So therefore, the testimony is subsequent to the kiddush. In other words, the Maisa on which the Eidim are testifying took place after the Kiddush. So there was a Kiddush Meikara in the Klishares, and therefore it assumed the status of Kiddush Saguf. And therefore, she is, therefore the Mincha is Nisrefes. So again, the original stira was for another man, and there's no edus that she had relations with that man. So the Ashkas Sotah is on a stira, is generated by a stira that had no edim to testify. So there was never a tos in the original Akdosh. So why is it Nisrefes? Because now, after she had a relationship of znus with one of the Pirchei Kahuna, then she could no longer drink from the Mayim Amorim. And we have now a Minchas Sotah, which has Kiddush Saguf, and it cannot culminate in Ashkas Sotah, therefore it's Nisrefes. Is Maskiflor of Masharshia, fellow Pirchei Kahuna V'Lavinosa. Right, we have a Mishnah later on that while she's being brought for the Ashkah, she'll be accompanied by Pirchei Kahuna who are going to protect her from a Maisa's Nus. And not only that, if she did have Znus, they supervised it, they saw the Maisa. And therefore, once again, according to Rav Sheshes, we should say that the Mayim cannot be effective. The young Kohanim escort her around the temple courtyard, the Azara, for the duration of the bitter waters procedure. How then could she have possibly committed adultery after her mincha was sanctified in the Klisharis? And the Gemara answers, Shezintzami Pirchei Kuna Atzman. So she had an adultery with one of the young Kohanim, as we call them. And the Gemara now suggests another possibility. Rav Sheish Soma Kagon Shenitzul Kol in a Kaveha. She snuck out. It's like a child in a classroom says, I have to go to the washroom. And Otu Pirchei Kuna Bekipa Tolile, where they lock her up. She's allowed to go to the bathroom, and she, somehow evaded them, and she had a Maisa beer. Rav Papa Amar Liolam Kid Amrina Meikara. Notice we said that the Eidim testified that during the stira, which was a violation of the kinui, and she was in seclusion, she actually had znus. Udekarma tepik l'chulin, and then you're asking, well, there's now an indication of mafreya of a hegdesh betos, because we didn't realize that there were edim, and therefore the mayim ha'ma'or would be ineffective. But rather, midrabanan, the entire enterprise of burning the mincha is only a rabbinic halacha. The spectator might come to the mistaken conclusion that something that had a kedusha of klishares, namely kedusha guf, can somehow, you could be mafkia the kedusha. So again, on a doraisa level, we have toes, because she never could be tested by the Mayim Amrorim, because there were witnesses to testify about her tumah. But the Rabbanon were afraid that not everyone is knowledgeable to understand that there's existence of witnesses, and that's why Lamafreya there was no Kedusha Guf. They think there was Kedusha Guf to this mincha. Now they see that the mincha is being burnt as if it was chulin. So they're going to begin to conclude that, you know what, you could take something that was a zevach or a mincha that was niskadish b'kli shares, and you could somehow remove its kedusha. Masiv Rav Mori. So now we have a kash on Rav Papa. Now I'm just wondering how Rav Papa would work this out, that minarabanan you could burn something that's kodesh. Because isn't that akiras davrim and ator b'kuvas say? Wait, just 1 second. Just 1 second. No, my cheshbon is wrong. I think I made a mistaken calculation, because what? On a doraisa level, it was not kodesh, because we're going to say lemafreya when we find out that there are eidim according to Rav Sheshes. Typically lechulin. So typically lechulin, and therefore the Rabbanan said, no, we're going to burn it. Okay. Masiv Rav Mori. We have a brisa that says, nitmeis min chasa achlo kitcha bekli. Let's say the mincha itself, before it was put into the klishares, contracted tumah, came in contact with tumah. Is harei kol hamenachos. And any mincha that contracted tumah before kiddush bekli, so it only had kedushas peh when they were makdish, it is tipada. It only has kedushas domim, which makes it subject to pidyon. So we can be poded with kesef, and then he takes the money and buys another mincha to replace the original mincha and fulfill his neder. However, mishakidcha bekli, if after kiddush bekli it contracted tumah, harei kechol hamenachos v'tisaref. Okay, so far so good. Kiddush hakometz, after there was kiddush bekli shares, v'lo hispik lakriva, right? The kometz is that which has to be burnt on the mizbech. Ad shemeshu, the Baal died, and therefore there's no hashkas hasotah after the Baal dies, because the whole purpose of hashkas hasotah is to be mater alabayla. Oh, ad shemesa here, if she died. So now we have a mincha, and there was a kiddush of the kometz in a klishares, but there's no hashkas hasotah. Reiki kol hamenachos. It's a psul after kiddush kli v'tisaref, and has to be burnt under the Mizbeach. Weiter. Korev HaKometz, v'lo hispik lechol shirayim, right? The Hakrovas HaKometz is matir, the rest, the balance of the mincha for Achilas Kohanim. Ad shemeis hu, but before the Kohanim got the chance to eat the shirayim, he died, or shemeis he or she died. Is arei kechala minachos. What's the halacha in any mincha that the kometz was brought on the mizbeach, the teyacha, and the mincha could be eaten by the zichrei kahuna. Shalas sofek bas mitchila. What does this mean? Mitchila. Let's try to emphasize this word mitchila. Right, the mincha is brought based on a suffix, which means what? That after the akrovas hakometz, there'll be mashke har with meimarorim. They'll clarify the suffix, and at the time of the akrovas hakometz, she was reuya lehashkos, and Kipra Sfeik of a Holchala. So the mitzvah was fulfilled. Veholchala. So what does the word Kipra mean? Kipra means that Osasa Mincha Zu B'Shas HaKtorah Kol Mashalel Lasos. So since Nasis mitzvasa kindina, and there was no psul in the gufa mincha, we can eat the mincha. Weiter. Bola edim shehi. So before they were makir the kometz, edim came and testified that she was tmeya minchas in isrefes. Right, already had kedushas kli. You cannot be makir on the mizbeach because we have already clarification of the suffix. She's not omedes lishtos. Weiter. Nimtzu Eideha Zomim. So the two witnesses that testified that she had stira after the kinui. But now we were Zomim, the two Eidim, is then Minchasa Chulin. So it sounds like the Gemara is assuming that Eid Zomim Nifsul Mafreya. And there's no kedushas peh. Why? Because the possibility of a sotah is predicated on the fact that there were two Eidim Ksherim that testified on the stira, and maybe even on the kinui. Okay, that's machlokas tanon, but on the stira for sure. So therefore, there was never a kedushas peh, and certainly not a kedushas haguf through kli. So therefore, it's got the status of mincha. The whole hagdasha was hagdasha b'tos. So now let's try to figure out what is Rav Mari's kash over here. He says, "Kasher huktish mincha b'tos, he yotzis l'chulin below pidyon klal, ve'ed choshin shem yom shemotziyah miklisha." Oh, what about Rav Papa's gzera? You're taking something that was in a klishares, and you're treating it like it's chulin, and therefore the spectator is going to assume that somehow you were able to remove kiddush saguf. He doesn't know and appreciate that the original hekdesha was betos, because it's only later that we find out that the Eidim were Eidim Zomim. And if that be the case, then when we learned that if Eidim came to testify in this nus, the minchas nisrefes, and it's not yotzis l'chulin, that's a doraisa halacha, because the mayim bodekar, even if there are Eidim out there that know that she had tumah, and it's against Rav Sheshes. And the Gemara answers, The Eidim Zomim comment, you're asking a kasha on Rav Sheshes from Eidim Zomim. She'ein chosheshin sheyitu lomar shemincha shekidsha bekli yotzis bechulu below pidgin. Why aren't we choshesh according to your Papa that the spectator is going to think that the mincha was sanctified with a klisharis and now it's going lechulin without even a pidgin? That's not a proof. Eidim zomim kola islahu. The people out there know and are aware of the fact that there was hazama, and therefore that the hagdish is betos. But when Eidim Kami Medinas Hayam to testify that she had znus, not everybody knows that the mayim are not both kimos, and therefore the hagdish of the mincha was betos. Therefore the Rabbana made a gzera shelo teitzi l'chulin. Now, until this point, we have rejected Rav Sheshes. Now, at this point, the Gemara makes a turnaround and brings a raya from a brisa to support Rav Sheshes, Tani Kavos Rav Sheshes, that if there are Eidim who know about her tumah, the mayim are not both, but v'lav mitame, but not from the drasha of the pasuk that Rav Sheshes brought v'eid einba. We need v'ein einba for a different drasha, that one aid, because ein aid ba means there are no two aidim, there's only one aid, and he's believed to say that she had tumah after kinyan stira with reglaim l'davar. But rather, we're going to derive Rav Sheshes' conclusion from a different pasuk, because ein aid ba we need for one aid for tumah. But rather, the pasuk says, "V'imlo nitma ha'isha utahora hi v'niksa v'nizra zara." So the brisa is going to emphasize the word tahora, and the word tahora is redundant. It would have been enough to say "V'imlo nitma ha'isha v'niksa." What's tahora? Why did the pasuk have to add the word tahora? And the answer is the Torah wants to tell you that if she was tahora, she'll be zocher to all the divine promises. V'lo sheyesh la edim imdinas hayam, but not a case of a Sotah nitma, and there was no bedikas mayim because there are edim imdinas hayam. So that even though the edim are not bodek her, she's not zocher to avtachos in the pasuk. You'll ask me, why did the Torah add the word of tahora? So now the Gemara is focusing, or I should say the Bryce is focusing on the vav of utahora as a miut, that only if she's tahora can she merit all the divine promises. V'lo shetolsa lo zchus. But not in case where she was nitma, and the mayim weren't bodika because she had a zchus. We're not going like Rav Shimon. Then the pasuk says he, which is also an extra word. It didn't have to say tahora he. It just could have said lo nitma isha v'niksa. So he is a miut. V'lo sheyisu v'yitnu ba. If this Sotah was saved from Bedikas Mayim because her kilkul was well known, sheyisu v'yitnu ba, Masamat means everybody's talking about her kilkul, is Mozros Balavonim. So now we're talking about Hitavos Lior Alavonim. So that's why the Mayim are not Bodika. And she's not Zocha to Olav Tachos. Anyway, we see clearly in this brisa that if a Sotah has Eidim Medinas Hayam Shenitma, the Mayim are not Bodika. So he says, Veloshi Yisu v'yitnu ba mozros b'levana. Not one who is spared from the effects of the bitter waters, because the perception of her guilt was so widespread that even the women who spin thread by the light of the moon gossip about her. A woman whose guilt is so widely assumed is not tested by the drinking of the Mayim Amorim. And for this, we have to learn the 6th parak of Sotah. So the Gemara now asks the following question. The Rabbi Shimon, he holds that there's no din, no enterprise called Tolin la B'schusa, Nehi Devav lo Dorish. Okay, you might say that he rejects the Bryce's drasha from the extra word vav, but va'ika, but there still is on the top of Daf Zayin, yeshla edu dinas hayam. But what about the case of Medina, of Edu Medina Hayam? There are witnesses out there, and therefore the effects of the water are negated. And once again, we have, according to Rav Shimon, the problem that then there won't be any aura, any fear on the part of the women for drinking the Meimarim. And the Gemara says, Lo Shchicha. Rav Shimon indeed agrees that the existence of witnesses will negate the effect of the waters. This is the exact opposite of what we said earlier. But since it's uncommon that there are witnesses overseas who would have seen her adultery, people will not consider that remote possibility. They will assume that a Sotah who survived the bitter waters is indeed innocent, and therefore Rav Shimon can still posit that there cannot be a common event such as the laying power of merit. Again, common, Schus Tola is considered Shchia, that would negate the effects of the waters. Because if that would be so, then it would undermine the whole purpose of trying to encourage a woman, a Sotah, to drink from the Meimar. And this leads us to the Mishnah on Daf Zayin Amid Am.